Hello everyone, we are here at Sunset Station. We're back with Chuck Esposito, Director of Race and Sports. And Chuck, it was a wild first weekend for the tournament. I want to challenge you to start off. If you can describe the tournament so far, maybe in one word, what would that word be?
I think it's pretty easy. Magical. I think it was phenomenal. But magical really stands out to me. You had Cinderella stories. You had some of the 2 #1 seeds that looked really good. You had great storylines. You had buzzer beaters, both with the spread and without the spread. For our side, and I think for the guests, just the experience, the atmosphere, and everything that goes to the tournament was magical.
Yeah, and we were talking a little bit before this about the parity. The first weekend, we were chatting a little bit going into it, and it seemed like that played out a little bit. If you want to talk a little bit about the parity in the field and how that played out.
Yeah, I think we talked about it last week before we cut the first phase of videos, and I think that that gap between David and Goliath has closed so much. It's not just that you had some big underdogs win and you had the first #1 seed ever get beat by a 16 seed. It's the way that those schools got beat. It's the way that Buffalo dominated Arizona. It's the way that Texas A&M dominated North Carolina. And it's the way that Virginia got beat. I mean, these teams got dominated and they were expected to win. And I think that just shows you that these smaller schools now, where kids have been together maybe for 2, 3, probably 3 and 4 years, compared to some of these majors where kids are one and done, that they have something to pull from. They've got that experience, they've played in some of these games before, and it means a lot at this stage when you can play as a team together, and I think they showed it this year with the amount of upsets. We still have 2 #9 seeds left and 2 #11 seeds left, so maybe being in Vegas, a lucky number 11 stands out this year.
Yeah, we'll see. Hey, crazier things have happened so far. So, again, looking back at this last weekend, there were some pretty bad beats that maybe some guests saw. Any one game or a couple games that stood out as some pretty bad beats from the first weekend?
Yeah, a lot of games do, John. The most amazing thing is that I spent a lot of time in the book and got to experience what the guests were going through, both from our side, who we're rooting for, and you know who they're rooting for. But when I'm not in the book, when I'm back in my office, just by the sounds of the crowd, I know that there's a game that's hovering around the number. And then based on the ooh or the yay, you know what happened. But 2 games really stand out to me. One was the Seton Hall, Kansas game, where the number was around 4, 4.5. They're up by 6, and Seton Hall hits that 3 right at the buzzer, and it was like, oh, and you heard just the crowd just like, I can't believe we just got beat. That was a bad one. Then on our side, you had a lot of Michigan money line play. And they come down with, I think, 3-point-something seconds to go, hit that monster 3. Poole had no points in the second half of that game, hits that 3 to win the game against Houston. So they advance, and a lot of money line action was there. And you heard the crowd start screaming. I knew that wasn't good for us. But that's just part of the tournament. Bad beats for us. Bad beats for the guests sometimes.
So moving from the first weekend of the tournament into the second, who are some teams that we knew were going to be here, still looking really strong going into weekend #2?
I think Villanova. I thought they had the easiest path to get to the Final Four coming out of the East. I think their toughest game might be the first one they play in the Sweet 16 against West Virginia, because I think then you look at Texas Tech and Purdue, they'll play the winner of that game. And if Purdue wins without Haas, I think it's an easier road for Villanova. I think Kentucky. You look at Kentucky, who they play freshmen, so we know there's going to be some inconsistency, but 3, 4 weeks ago I would have said there's no chance they survived the first weekend. But they did, and now you look at the way everything's kind of shaping up, they could easily be in the Final Four as well. They're coming together as a team, and then you look at how strong Duke has played. I mean, they weren't even the #1 seed in their region. Kansas was, yet Duke is playing so well. So I think those 3 schools right now, no big surprise that they're playing where they're at because of the way they finished the season and how hot they've been in the tournament.
Perfect. So let's go with some surprises then, moving into weekend #2. Who do we maybe not expect to be there? They're still hanging on and have some momentum.
You can talk about a lot of teams, but the 2 that really stand out to me are the 2 #11 seeds. You talk about Syracuse. Now, they've had to play 3 games. Everyone else has only played 2 games because they were one of the first 4 in. No one thought they should be there, but it's Coach Jim Boeheim. I mean, I can imagine his speech. No one thinks we should be here, guys. It's okay. We're not as good as any of those schools. We shouldn't be here. And they go out and they win games. I mean, you look at a coach, and we talked about this, that a lot of times in a game, you look at a coach's experience, and that's Jim Boeheim. He had a lot to pull from with his team. So that's a surprise. And I think Loyola of Chicago, I mean, with the buzzer beaters and the way they've played, the Ramblers haven't been in the tournament since 1985. You think about that. They give up a lot of points. They give up the 5th most points in the country, but they're the 3rd best field goal percentage team in the country. So they can score a little bit too. That's kind of I think if you look at all the Cinderella stories for me, it's Loyola Chicago Ramblers right now. It's not being in the tournament from 1985, and just the way they've played right now, they're just a great story.
Yeah, they're a fun story.
They are a fun story.
Yeah. So we got the pairings now. Looking into the second weekend, we've got the favorites. We've got some dogs who might not have been projected to be there. But who are the most intriguing second-round matchups that you're looking forward to?
I think the Loyola Chicago against Reno game, Nevada-Reno. I think both those schools most people didn't think would be there right now, and they're there. So I think it's an intriguing matchup. Whoever wins that game is probably going to play Kentucky, and that could be an interesting one. I think the Texas Tech and Purdue game, Purdue's just a small favorite in that game, and I think without Haas, that really hurts Purdue. But if they can win this game, they're going to have an intriguing matchup too, potentially against Villanova. And I think you look at Villanova with their guard play, I think they're going to have an easier time playing the winner, if they win, of Texas Tech and Purdue than they are against West Virginia. I think it's the style of West Virginia. We know that Coach Huggins with that Huggy Bear and the way full court press and the way he plays defense against Jay Wright and Villanova's guard play. Those guards aren't going to be pressed into making mistakes, but it is going to be just 40 minutes of treachery against that defense. So I think that's a really good matchup too.
So looking ahead to the Saturday and Sunday matchups, who really strikes you as some intriguing matchups?
I think that any of them are going to be great. I mean, just based on the atmosphere of the tournament, I think it's going to be phenomenal. But I think if you happen to get Gonzaga and Michigan to play each other, we know how popular Gonzaga is, and Michigan's one of those schools that I thought could go to the Final Four. And if they match up, and Michigan had that last-second win against Houston, I think that's really good. And then if it all plays out, and you have Kansas, who is a #1 seed, but I thought had the toughest road of all the #1s to get to the Final Four, yet they're still one of 2 that is left playing, they have to play Duke. So Kansas was the #1 seed in their region. They're going to have to play Duke, and they're not even going to be the favorite in that game. And they weren't the favorite in their region either. So I think both those two, if it plays out, would be really interesting. And then if Kentucky does win, if they're playing one of those Cinderella stories of either UNR or Loyola Chicago, that could be interesting as well. But there's some great basketball this weekend. If the second weekend's as exciting as the first weekend, I think everyone's really going to enjoy what the madness brings to all of our sports books, the economic impact throughout the valley, and just the atmosphere. It's if you haven't done it, you have to do it. And I've seen so many familiar faces of guys and girls and guests that come out and say, we only come out every year just for this, and you can see why.
Well, it's going to be very difficult to top the first weekend of the madness, but fingers crossed there should be some great matchups this coming weekend. Thank you very much, Chuck, for taking the time today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It should be exciting.
Thank you everybody for watching. We really appreciate you taking the time. With weekend number 2 of the tournament coming up, be sure to have your Play Plus account locked and loaded. It's the easiest way to add funds from anywhere into your STN Sports account. Good luck this weekend, and we'll see you next week.